I work with a group of science and math people in my own department. Our focus of our ed tech branch, grants from the federal government, are our last one was integrating math and science with technology.
Good idea.
IMAS grant.
Good idea.
But I'm a language arts teacher. Some of
Okay.
the people I work with, are language arts
So you really
teachers.
responded to the
Yeah.
writing essays.
Exactly. So what would be the application of eToys to a language arts teacher?
Ah, that's a good question. Well, let's work on the more general
Okay.
questions. And yeah, so of course one of the things we did when we were inventing personal computing at Xerox PARC was to think about that problem a lot. That led to Word, the original version of Microsoft Word was done there, and before that Engelbart had done hypertext kinds of things. So there was a lot of thought, and also Ted Nelson in the 60s had many ideas. So there's a lot of thought about what it would mean to be able to both peruse and to create various forms of narrative. And so one of the things that, and of course we realized that people were going to go font crazy, and that people would go link crazy, and so forth. But basically, I think that when we thought about serious discourse, which of course the computer is not, if you look at the popular culture, it doesn't use computing for serious discourse, whether you need math or science or not, because it's mostly about opinion and mostly about unsupported opinion. But the thought we had was that, generally speaking, in both descriptive but especially argumentative writing, that what you're trying to do is to, in something that's like an essay of the future, that in any good essay, what you're trying to do is to help the reader in as many ways as you can to get to a place by 2/3 of the way through where you can explain your big idea of the essay to them and have some feeling that it's going to be understood. And to me, that's the main as Richard Wurman once said, he said the problem with most writers is when they tell the truth, they think they've done their job. And it's exactly the opposite. Picasso Picasso said, art is a lie that tells the truth. So there just isn't enough room in an essay to tell the truth. You have to do something else. And you have to do something that's rather like good drawing, where you can't draw the table as it is. You have to draw the table from a particular point of view, and maybe you can show a few points of view. So we got very interested in that in the late 60s and the early 70s, of what was that going to be, what was that actually going to be like. But one of the things that we realized was that one of the real keys, at least according to McLuhan and other people who've studied the influence of just being able to read in a structured medium, regardless of what the content actually is, that we realized that we had to do a lot of work to be able to at least do what print did. So I was actually the original designer of those fonts.
Okay.
Because technology often gives you something more and takes something away. And the displays in those days were green and not very pretty. And so, and we knew the displays of the future were going to be like the ones we have. And so we got very interested in what would it actually take to make something that was actually readable. And except for the Kindle and other use of the e-ink displays, displays actually are still antagonistic.
Yeah.
So the better a reader you are, the harder it is to read text, even off the good displays. They look good, but they actually have various kinds of artifacts that makes it.
It's not my favorite place to do extended reading myself.
No, because the e-ink displays are an exception because they are actually still.
Yes.
They don't actually move around. They don't interfere with your own eye tracking of what's going on. So I think in the language arts, the and again, I haven't ever tried to do a curriculum for it, but I read a lot. And the thing that struck me about, 5 or 6 years ago, some question came up about Plato's Republic. So I went on the web and I found the Berkeley Classics Library, which is kind of a consortium of other classics library, and the classicists have taken the web to heart. So compared to what I could have done 30 or 40 years ago, there was just there was the Jowett translation, but there was every other kind of translation, there was every kind of commentary, and it lacked a certain organization. I mean, there was so much stuff
Sure.
there, but in fact it was incredibly rich. So if I were somebody who got interested for my own intellectual reasons in some part of the Republic, and there's certainly plenty of parts of it that are worthwhile being interested in today, I would be in a position to actually think about it from many different points of view, aided by these points of view, and come up with my own, and that would be a pretty rich set of ways to think about it. I would say that from the standpoint of what you'd hope the web to be, it isn't there yet, because what you have is a lot of stuff, but not very well organized. So it lacks context, and because of that, for instance, if you think about the relationship of the Elizabethan theater to the writing that appeared in the 17th century, which are probably the most important, and then the 18th are probably the two most important centuries we've ever had as far as the writing about ideas and stuff. You can't find what I happen to know, because I've got a zillion books about it, about theater. That stuff is, unless you know what the actual information is ahead of time, the web won't give it to you, because it hasn't been indexed or organized in the Google search engine. Though it has powers in one dimension, it lacks them in another dimension. And so my assessment of that is that the language arts are served in a couple of ways strongly, but this is one where you'd like to have a teacher who really understands and loves the subject above all things, I think, and someone who knows where to go.
Sure,
To
so
help.
because I know that I spend, in my own style of learning, the web has become very valuable to me, but I know I spend an inordinate amount of time searching for what I'm looking for. Now, relative to going to a library and moving through the stacks and things in the past, I don't consider it that long a time, that I have access. But yeah, there are gaping holes in organization that sometimes you find it very easy to, and yet others there aren't. But then that's to me a glimpse of what's to come. So in some respects, I get excited.
Well, I think that people have written a fair amount about the trade-offs you get between making everybody an author.
Sure.
And the incredible drop-off you get of editorial organization.
Kind of like the old
because
desktop
of that.
publishing in days, but when it
Yeah.
first introduced.
Yeah. So the whole thing, and one would hope that it's not going to settle down kind of where it is now, because to me that is pathetically bad. It's bad for human thinking right now. But on the other hand, it's nice to have more avenues for publishing ideas than the ones that were in the past, and I'll be very curious to see how it does settle down.